Director at Generally Bam Studios. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to share this space with you. I hope everyone had a great day. And with that, we're just going to go ahead and get right into the topic of today's show. The topic for today's show is African Americans are too emotional and they lack critical thinking skills. If you just got upset, then you prove my point, because before I could even get into my case, before I could even prove it. So, of course, I'm not speaking about everyone, and of course, this is not representative of everyone, but I do believe that it represents enough of us that this is a subject worth exploring. So, with that, what inspired me to speak about this was that, quite frankly, I see us African Americans being exploited by celebrities, the media, and our leaders on a daily basis. And of course, this is not representative of everyone, but it happens enough that I took note to it. And because we tend to be more emotional thinkers versus critical thinkers, this leaves us vulnerable to be preyed upon. So let's talk about how this affects us. So number one, it impairs our ability to be critical thinkers and think strategically. Number two, it impairs fairness. And what I mean by that is when you're an emotional thinker versus a critical thinker, what happens is that you, biasness tends to occur, right? Because it can occur because emotions are volatile, meaning that they change frequently. So your argument or whatever viewpoint you're trying to prove, it's not really founded or based in anything. And likewise, if someone's trying to present something to you and they're just making an emotional appeal, there's no real basis for what they're basing that argument in. Number three, it hinders group cooperation and it maintains petty disagreements. And this is so important. This part right here, because we tend to be more emotional versus critical thinkers sometimes, it hinders group cooperation. It maintains petty disagreements because when you're constantly in your emotions, you cannot think in terms of quickly squashing minor disputes because you're in your emotions. So when you're in this, if this is where you are, it hinders group performance, basically. It hinders group performance. It hinders our ability to move forward in an adequate manner and at an adequate pace, because you're always in this place where, well, I don't like what he or she did, or I don't like what this group stands for. And so it hinders the ability to be able to come together and truly focus on the things that are impacting our communities. And again, when you're always in your emotions, or you're more of an emotional thinker versus a critical thinker, it makes you easy prey. People can easily prey upon you because they know what your vulnerabilities are and your weaknesses. And before I go any further, there is one footnote to this. I'm not speaking about manipulation from the perspective of romantic or platonic relationships. I'm speaking about it from the perspective and standpoint of how we operate as a group. So that's how we're going to tackle this subject today. So now let's get into emotions. Now, Paul Elkman, he is an American psychologist and he studies emotions. And through years of research, he concluded that all human beings have 6 basic emotions. Those emotions are sadness, happiness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. Now, these are your 6 basic emotions, and they do not include your complex emotions. Complex emotions are two or more of your basic emotions. An example of this would be fear, anger, and disgust make up the complex emotion of hatred. So let me break this. Okay, so that's a complex emotion. So now I want to break down the 6 basic emotions real quick. So with sadness, an example of sadness would be despair, hurt, being inconsolable, happiness, bliss, excitement, being ecstatic, fear, threatened, feeling nervous, feeling defensive, anger, outrage, vengeful, feeling insulted, surprise, amazement, bewilderment, astonishment, disgust, horror, being appalled. So let's stop right here. Now, if this is where we can normally be found whenever we're presenting arguments or presenting our viewpoints to others, or this is how others are engaging us, which is through our emotions versus our intellect, then this is not a sound basis to form an argument on or present your viewpoint, because these are just your emotions there, and they're always in flux. Now, it could be a great starting point, but there's going to have to be something else. So let's move on to critical thinking. Now, I'm going to define critical thinking. And I pulled this definition from the foundation of critical thinking, and I'll leave the link in the description box. Anything that I talk about today that I'm citing, I'll leave the links in the description box. So critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. In its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions: clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reason, depth, breadth, and fairness. Fairness. I'm going to come back to that because it's very important. Critical thinking also involves scientific thinking, mathematical thinking, historical thinking, anthropological thinking, economic thinking, moral thinking, and philosophical thinking. So with that, nowhere in that definition or description do we see anything about basing arguments and viewpoints on your emotions. Now, you could argue that experience could be a part of that, and that's absolutely valid, but there's going to have to be something more if you're going to make a sound argument on, if you're going to basically make a sound argument, because just emotions alone is not going to get it. So let's go back to fairness, and I stress that for a reason, because you have people that know how to reason very well. They know how to present great arguments, but sometimes those arguments are not based in the correct framework, and that's why I emphasized fairness. Critical thinking varies according to the motivation underlying it. Let me repeat that. Critical thinking varies according to the motivation underlying it. When grounded in selfish motives, it is often manifested in the skillful manipulation of ideas in service of one's own or one's group's vested interests. So it's very important that as a critical thinker, that the framework for which you're placing your argument in is based in fairness. Because if it's not, it lacks intellectual integrity, and then it's flawed. And that means that you're probably trying to manipulate someone somehow for selfish gains or selfish reasons, or to further some agenda. So that's what that is. So, and before I go any further, I do want to say this. With critical thinking, and I think that pretty much said it right there, but I just really want to emphasize that again. It's always about the underlying motivation that the whomever is basing their argument in. Anyone can be a critical thinker, but if they're utilizing it for selfish reasons, or they're doing it to, or somehow there's something manipulative about their argument, then it's a flawed argument. So now let's talk about manipulation. Okay. Now, manipulation is defined as the ability to control or play upon by artful, unfair, or insidious means, especially to one's own advantage. Now, I'm going to give some examples that I've seen as far as African Americans being manipulated. And again, I'm not speaking in terms of romantic or platonic relationships, although the examples that I'm getting ready to give could apply to those scenarios as well. But for this scenario, I'm speaking more in terms of what I've seen in terms of our celebrities, our leaders, and even our media. So, number one, people who are always looking for confirmation are easily manipulated. If you're the type of person who is always looking for confirmation versus information, you're most likely going to be manipulated at some point in your life, because you are someone who is just looking for someone to confirm whatever it is you believe. You aren't looking for any type of new information that could possibly contradict what your current viewpoints are, to elevate you to a new level of consciousness. You're just one of these type of individuals who are probably set in your own belief systems, and there's always something new to learn. So if you're one of these type of people, yeah, you're more likely going to be manipulated if you're always looking for confirmation versus information. Another type of person that is prone to getting manipulated is the person who likes to have their ego stroked. I think everyone kind of likes to have their ego stroked from time to time, but I think that with everything there's balance. If you're always looking for someone to stroke your ego, people can use that as a means and a way of manipulating you, because it's just kind of like, just stroke their ego a little bit and you could get whatever you want out of this person. So that's what that is. Now, manipulators know your weaknesses and vulnerabilities. A good example of this would be misapplication of history. Sometimes I hear celebrities or leaders, or even our media, well, no, I won't say media in this instance, but when it comes to misapplication of history, you know how they do us, that's how they do black people. What are you talking about? You didn't really give an example. You just kind of vaguely made this generalization, although I may know what you're talking about, but I need for you to convey it. This is an appeal to emotion, which people use a lot to, if they have some type of agenda that they're trying to fulfill. Another appeal to the emotion, which is basically to make appeals to your weaknesses and your vulnerabilities based upon our history in this country. Let's see, charity. Oh my goodness, charity is a good one. Sometimes people will donate to different organizations that have missions primarily targeted at African Americans, or they would advocate for different issues primarily targeted at African Americans. Examples of this would be criminal justice reform, police brutality against African Americans. These people do these type things because they're looking for a way into our community, whether it be to further their career interests, to launch some business somehow, give a chain of stores in our communities, whatever the situation might be. A gift should always be free. A donation, you shouldn't expect anything in return for a donation, but people use these, these channels as a way to get into our community. So it's another form of manipulation. Manipulation through kindness, that's basically what that is. Helping capacities. I see this a lot happening on YouTube. Now, I always tell people that YouTube is a great place to present your ideas and connect with people all over the world. But YouTube is also a playground for the wicked. And what I mean by that is that anyone can set up a platform on YouTube and start conveying their ideas to people. And sometimes they're not doing these things in earnest. We have a lot of people on YouTube who utilize their platforms for pretty much evil purposes. Basically, I don't know how else to, really break that down except for to say it like that. But the best example of that I can use is that we have a lot of men and women on YouTube, black men and women who have grievances against one another. Black men against black women against black men. And they seek, and at some point they've been hurt in their lives. So now they have a vendetta and they search out other people who have been hurt in similar ways. And they present themselves as some type of life coach, some type of lifestyle coach, or they're always in some type of helping capacity normally. But really, it's not really to help their target audience. It's more so to fulfill whatever vendetta they have through those people. And they make little versions of themselves, basically. And these people go out and convey their thoughts in the world. And they, through them, they mistreat and, do the things that they wish that they could have did with whatever person that hurt them, inflict pain through their viewers. And what I mean, I probably said that wrong, but through the viewpoints that they espouse to the world, basically, their viewers will take those viewpoints and create further harm and havoc. So be mindful of who you're following. And again, you have some people on YouTube who have different niches. So, and what I mean by that, they have, they have very specialized platforms. So that's not to say that those people are manipulating people, because again, we have to evaluate the framework in which they're doing things. So again, that's why critical thinking is important. But with that, just be mindful and always employ critical thinking. And if it doesn't feel right, then maybe it's not right. So, let's see. Guilt tripping, manipulation by making the target feel bad for something they either did or failed to do, and they're further manipulated into acting to make up for their wrongdoings. I've seen celebrities do this. For example, if they've come out with a product or they or yeah, if they've come out with some product and we didn't support it or whatever, they will make light of it, right? And this is my whole perspective on that. I wholeheartedly believe in supporting Black. I 100% do it myself when I can. But I do it when the products and the services are worth supporting. I do not support Black just to be supporting Black and giving my money out to everybody. No, I support Black when the products and services are worth it. I stand up for Blacks, not just because they're Black, but I stand up for other Blacks because they can be found standing in truth and righteousness, and that's how you should handle those type situations too. Media manipulates us by intentionally leaving out information. I believe that they do this for ratings. I believe that they do this for sensationalism and to support various different agendas depending on which news outlet that they're with or organization that they're with. And this is why Black-owned media is important, so that we can put out the facts and then allow the people to come to whatever conclusion that they come to with the facts. Okay, now with that, that was just a short list of the many ways in which I've seen us manipulated. There are many more, but those are just some of the major forms that I've seen employed and used against us. I do want to mention this one. This is more something that I've seen that occurs within the group as a whole. I see pity plays a lot, and this is a technique of guilt tripping where the perpetrator paints him or herself either as hopelessly helpless or as a victim. And I felt that this one was important to bring up just because, and I know this may be a pain point for some people, but again, think critically, be open-minded, get out of your emotions. We've had a lot of unfortunate police shootings recently, and I've noticed a lot of the time that our people will paint themselves as victims, and many times they are, but I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that sometimes these people have put themselves in reckless situations due to their own reckless reactions, right? And I think that at some point we have to acknowledge this, Black people, we have to acknowledge this, because a lot of times, I'm not even going to say a lot of time, but all of the time, if they live to make it out of a situation, they come back to the Black community and they want our advocacy. Our advocacy should not be, excuse me, I almost went hoarse here. Our advocacy should not be free. Our advocacy, if we're going to devote our time and our efforts to something, then it needs to be because it's coming from a perspective of truth, not because you're just going to advocate for everybody that's Black. Everybody that's Black does not deserve our advocacy. It's getting to a point where we have to hold people accountable, for the situations that they place themselves in, So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end here. And I just want to say, be mindful, Black people. Be mindful of the people who are influencing your decisions and your outlook on life. Anyone could be a manipulator, right? I think at some point everyone manipulates information based upon the viewpoints and the arguments that you're trying to make. But again, it goes back to remembering what critical thinking is. It's based in intellectual integrity. Always evaluate that framework that they're basing their argument and their viewpoints in. If it's coming from a perspective of biasness or some type of manipulation, then something's wrong. That means that their views are intellectually flawed, right? And something else, again, going back to group cooperation, critical thinking is very important for this, guys, because as a group, we cannot move forward and address the issues in our communities from first the foundation of integrity and honesty, but we can't do that when we're always in our emotions, right? We got to get out of that. We got to learn how to think critically, learn how to squash minor and even major disagreements quickly. Don't let them linger. We have to learn how to do these things so that we can move forward as a group, like any other group, and advance and elevate ourselves to a higher level of consciousness, And I can't emphasize that any more so than what I'm really trying to do right now, because it's so important. I've seen so many times in the Black community because we're always in our emotions about everything imaginable, oh, I don't like this person over here, so they form a group and they're doing something. I don't like what this organization stands for, so then they form a group and they're doing something. Whereas these things are great, and there's nothing wrong with having your own sets and groups and things. At some point, you have to understand that it causes division. And you cannot move forward as a whole unit like that. At the end of the day, we are all individuals, but there comes points when, for the sake of the group, we have to come together as a whole unit and address those things which are pertinent to our group and that affect us in common. That's what this is about. Those things that affect us in common. Come out of your emotions long enough so that we can come together and address those things and move forward and not linger and be stuck in our emotions over small things that are often minor. So, video for today, just get out of your emotions, Black people. Be strong, critical thinkers, and let me say this before I forget. If you ever find yourself being a victim of manipulation, it is not your fault. It is the fault of the manipulator for intentionally or maybe non-intentionally sometimes, based upon the information that they have, because sometimes it can happen unintentionally. But it is never your fault. It's always the fault of the person who attempted, and again, maybe it was something that, was a misunderstanding, but it's always their fault. But once you understand the various ways in which you have been manipulated in the past, you have an obligation to yourself to grow and change. That's your obligation to yourself. So with that, I hope I didn't miss anything. I notated everything I want to talk about, but if I did, I'll just do another video. But with that, Black people, I'm glad to share. I'm excited to share this space with you, and I hope you got something out of the video, and I will see you in the next. And have a nice day, and all that good stuff.